Greetings. We're going to do a continuation from last night. Wanted to talk to you a little bit. I watched a brilliant group of gentlemen and women communicating on a Zoom call, and I just found it very particular and peculiar that the topic of discussion was about titles, licensure. They delved into ecclesiastical law a little bit, but they started to talk about the development of trust, about equitable title versus legal title, and whether it was all from the legal realm and out of necessity to separate us from our rights. Well, when we look at legal and equitable title, it's really important to understand this. In order to have a trust, there must be somebody who gave or lent or extended something of value to somebody who hasn't given any value or consideration in return. That manifests a trust, right? Now we're talking about me as a man giving something to somebody that I own, so I have the legal interest in it, and they're holding the equitable interest at this point because they have the mere use of the product or whatever I gave to them, right? So I gave them something of value. That creates a trust. They hold equitable title. I hold legal title. Okay. And this is probably the easiest way that I can teach and show you guys how this system really works. Okay. And this is what makes them the trustees and you the beneficiary. All right. You gave them something as the grantor. You gifted them something. You gave them something unbeknownst to you. Your life source energy was donated to their cause, okay? And you are the bailor for the bailee, all right? They have something of equitable interest that belongs to you, okay? And they're holding the legal title to it, and you're merely holding the equitable side of it, and you're just in usufruct of it, okay? You're utilizing it. But in truth be told, they're actually in usufruct using your life source energy long before you were ever born, okay? So they owe you a duty. It's a trust relationship. Now, and their clever artifices and schemes, which I find really funny, going through electronically 160 volumes of American jurisprudence, you will never find a definition for the word scheme, although Congress and the legislators use it repetitiously throughout their extraordinary legislation and writs they allege to purport to be law that applies to what many believe as them as a man. Okay, but they're operating in a different venue. They're operating on a commercial side, not on the de jure republic side, which we were guaranteed. Okay, so it's our lack of knowledge and understanding of the words that they're utilizing that ensnares us. We are our own worst enemy. I used to grind an axe on these people all the time. And one day I woke up and it was as though I had had an epiphany. It was like I was touched by God. And he said, "Hey, look, man, you're getting this all wrong, Bubba. Sit back, chill out, and relax." So the debate that was happening that I was listening to today that was on a Zoom call was about licensure. And they say, well, you have to have a license. Now, I say to any man who's cognizant, and when I say man, I'm talking plural, men or women. If I say that you have to have something in order to be gainfully employed by me, do I not have an obligation to provide the ends? If I provide the ends, don't I also have to provide the means? If you're my employer and I'm your employee and I'm telling you that you have to have certain tools to be on my job site, duty to provide you those tools, right? Because after all, you're giving your life source energy to me to build a nice cushion underneath my ass, structured through a corporation or a trust or an LLC or an S corp or however you want to structure it, right? So if I'm giving you an obligation to bring something to the job site that's going to bring value to my company, I owe you for it. Okay, that's the point. So when they say to have a driver's license, okay, you have to have it. He who provides the ends provides the means. They should naturally just give it to you. And that's wherein you can't convert a right into a privilege and issue a license and a fee for that benefit, okay? And Facebook is screwing with me again. I've got plenty of service, so I'm not sure why I'm losing connection. Lord, I apologize, but nothing I can do about it. We are going to pick up where I left off last night. We were talking about the Filipinos and them being removed from the country. We're talking about the two different jurisdictions, the corporate jurisdiction, Title 28, 3002, 15A. But we're going to get into the three definitions that the U.S. Supreme Court recognizes for the United States, or United States, okay? And that's going to be coming on in the literature later on this evening to help you guys be able to distinguish what's really transpiring, because we, the people in America, are very unique. Republican form of government, so long as we could keep it, right? Which means it's never truly lost unless we lose the ancient knowledge and technology to enforce it. Thankfully, due to a vast amount of due diligence amongst many of my constituents and throughout the world, it's being rejuvenated. And that's something that scares the system to death. And in fact, it scares them so much, they're much like a serpent, where they have to shed their skin, change their tactics, and move differently, okay? Re-engineering society through their 508C1 or 501c3 church religious organizations, which, make no mistake about it, have to agree with the government. They can never go against the status quo of the corporate government, okay? They'll lose their tax exemption, which churches have always had an exemption from taxes. But now, underneath this corporate oligarchy, they have a privilege extended to them through the 501c3 organization, okay? So it's important to understand that the church that happens between four walls, you're never going to get this information disseminated to you the way that the free thinkers that think outside the box, that are actually doing their due diligence, are conveying it to you. You'll never see a preacher speak to you like I speak to you. That's a guarantee, okay? And it's not the fact that I use profane language or anything of that sort. It's the information and the way that it's disseminated to you that is most beneficial. For example, in the Bible it says that you are only to respect a God-fearing government. Now, I don't know about you, but in my entirety of my life, I don't think I've ever seen a God-fearing government, or what I would classify as a God-fearing government, ladies and gentlemen. And that's throughout the world. I've just never seen it. And I don't believe that in my lifetime I may ever see it, because the very definition of government is to control the mind, of men. Okay, but in 1 Timothy section 9, it very clearly states what the law of the Pharisees was intended for. It was intended for the heathens, the whores, the man-stealers, the murderers, right? The adulteress, right? And that's what the law of the Pharisees was designed for, was those without a moral compass. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to say that 90% of the world, for the most part, are good by nature people, okay? And that brings up the law of nature, the God's law, okay? Equitable by nature. For the most part, I've seen people that weren't even raised anywhere close to the way that I was raised, and they still are good by nature, even though they were never told stealing is wrong. They were never taught by their family that stealing is wrong. They, in their heart, know that it's not proper, that it's incorrect, and that it's immoral to take something that otherwise doesn't belong to them. Okay? So it doesn't necessarily have to be taught to you for it to be ingrained in your heart, for the law is written on your heart. All right? Now we're going to get into some deeper stuff today. Obviously, I'm down here in Indiana, and they've changed the system again. They've metamorphed the system once again because people were catching on to the DUNS number. Okay, so what they did with the DUNS number is now they roll the DUNS number over into the SAM.gov. SAM.gov is another fancy way of them having another identifier where they can conceal their DUNS numbers, where they can conceal, if you're reading and keeping up with what happened April 4th, 2022, they can now conceal, if they so choose, particular information. What I find so interesting about that is They're using the future labor of future offspring as pledges to bolster their economic system, all while hiding from you the very nature of their business, okay? And that business is commercial, baby. And if I'm an investor, a preferred stock holder in said corporation, by golly, if I want your DUNS number, you better give it up. If I want your SAM identifier, you better give it up, all right? Because there's a reason I want it, because I'm the damn boss, and you are too. That's what's brilliant about this. You are the boss as soon as you figure this shit out. You can tell them to jump. You can tell them to dig. You can tell them to go fly a fucking kite. It's all about whether or not you know and you believe in your heart that you are, in fact, the boss. You are the beneficiary. You are the grantor who created the estate with your mother as the informant that gave them the ability from the time you were born to the time you were 18 to maintain that estate for your benefit. But see, they never taught us that at the age of 18, you were supposed to come and let them know that you're alive, you're cognizant, you're well, you can handle your own affairs as a man, and you need the residue, the trust residue, the trust res from your estate returned to you as you are the heir and the beneficiary of the estate manifested at your place of nativity, okay? So the birth certificate is something that is born, all right? And you, is something that is birthed, okay? And you naturally were born. Two different definitions, two different connotations, all right? The birth of a ship happens as a birth. It's not, the ship is not born, the ship is birthed, okay? And your estate was birthed, okay? And it was birthed for you, for you. Now, I took a Social Security card that belonged to one of my family members. She was born in 1920, 22, somewhere in that era. And naturally, the Social Security Administration didn't kick in till much further down the road, all right? Remember the Township Maternity Reward Act of 1921, then came along the Federal Reserve Banking Act, then came around the Social Security Administration and everything else, right? So this woman was clearly born prior to the Federal Reserve Banking Act. She was born prior to the Social Security Administration Act, okay? And yet she still found in her lifetime that she went and acquired this Social Security card. Now, what I found amazing about the Social Security card, first of all, it's in mint condition. I mean, mint. And I shared it on Facebook with you guys so you could really see it. It says Social Security account number. Okay. First of all, it's identifying that it's an account. And when you flip the card over on its backside, which is very much different than the one that I am in possession of. Okay. It's not necessarily mine. I didn't create it, but I am in possession of it. But on the back of this woman's card, it says your account, that you can receive a financial statement of your account once a year from the Social Security Administration. Now, if you look at the newer cards, they do not say that anymore. And I just find it very peculiar and odd how they manipulate the situation and change it as people start to realize what they've been subjected to. Okay. And so again, that's where I'm seeing the difference in the DUNS numbers being converted over to the SAM, SAM.gov. And if you read the explanation in SAM.gov, it says that the entities may choose to disclose or may choose not to disclose the identifier for their principal corporation, including the name, okay? Whether it's an LLC, an S-Corp, a corporation, a trust, a limited liability company, whatever it may be, they now have the option of hiding that information from you. So let's move forward here. The Filipino referenced above was both an alien and a national at the same time. How can this be? The answer is that each word applies to a different context. He was a constitutional alien and a statutory national at the same time. He was alien to State of the Union, United States, but still a member of the nation United States, okay? And again, I told you earlier, we're going to get into depth about the three definitions of the United States recognized by the Supreme Court, which also affirms the law of the land, right? Okay? And we'll get into a little bit later about how I feel about court case law. Okay, case law, they call it. Courts, first of all, can't create law. They were never delegated that kind of authority or power to create law. So this illusion of case law, although I use it from time to time against them, I don't ever allow them to use it against me. Okay, period. Because it's just some jackass's opinion. And maybe he didn't get laid that night. Maybe his wife forgot to make blueberry muffins. Maybe she packed him one of them nasty ass horse salami cock sandwiches, bologna or salami, and he hates it. And so he's just in a bad freaking mood. Now he's out there creating case law based upon how he feels for the day, right? So I don't allow them to use case law against me. If you're going to use anything against me, it's natural law. You show me my intent, where I intended to cause harm, injury, damage, and loss. You show me where I was either negligent or that I made a conscious, knowing, willing, and intentional effort to cause harm, damage, loss, or you can fuck off. That's how I roll. And that's how you should roll too. All right? Because again, 90% of the populace is good by nature. They're not out there every day scheming and plotting on how they can fuck people over, cause harm, damage, loss to their fellow brothers and sisters and their neighbors. They're not out there plotting and scheming how they can lie, loot, plunder, and steal from their neighbor using artifices and schemes. No, sir. No, ma'am. You want to know who's doing that? It's lawyers. Lawyers are out there every freaking day plotting maliciously, slanderous schemes to try and fix liability to you for victimless alleged crimes that have never occurred. There is no injured party. There's no affiant saying that they've been caused harm, damage, injury, and loss, explaining in an affidavit who, what, when, where, how, and why they were caused harm. Okay? So if you want to talk about the real villains throughout the world, start assessing the lawyers. Because I'm going to tell you right now, you can't be a judge in this country anyway, unless you've had 5 years of good standing of being a lying, looting, pandering pile of shit in this nation, okay? And you gotta have a good standing, a good track record of screwing people over on presumption and assumption, because remember, there are two things that'll never be tried in a court. The truth and the facts. Ever. Can never be tried in a court, which means everything they're doing is under the assumption of presumption and assumption, unrebutted affidavits, all of a sudden manifest into facts, even though an attorney under Trinsley versus Pagliaro has no firsthand knowledge of anything, and thus any statement they make in the court is not sufficient for a statutory judgment. Period. End of discussion, okay? Or a declaratory judgment, all right? And that lends to what I was talking about earlier about void judgments. Void judgments. I would venture to say the better of 98% of mortgages are all hoopla and bullshit. When you really start to understand the mortgage industry, every judgment that's been rendered for removing you from your house, which I guarantee you paid for, let this just sink in for just a second. You sign the promissory note. 72 hours later, maybe 4 days later, the bank calls you back and says, hey, we got good news for you. Everything went through. You've been approved. Well, let's just stop there, Scooter. First of all, I issued a promissory note, which, by definition, under Title 18, subsection 8, is an obligation of the United States, number one, okay? And number two, the promissory note constitutes legal tender, all right? And I'm the only signator to that promissory note, which means I am the undisclosed third-party beneficiary to that note in question. Now, just wrap your head around this beautiful little scheme they got going on. So the bank says, congratulations, you've been approved. Come on down. We've got this mortgage package for you. And guess what? It's all in-house. I've got the notary here for you. We've got witnesses here for you. Granted, they work for the bank. Everything's in-house. We can get this done. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Come again, right? And they make it so easy. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Things that are easy in this life often aren't worth keeping or having or even participating in, okay? So what you should rightfully do is take that mortgage package and walk right back out of the door with it. Thank you very much for the paperwork. I'll review this in my good time. I'll take it under advisement, but under no uncertain circumstances, I'm going to sign this shit right here, right now. Now, I know people are laughing about this, but I'm going to show you something. Ask yourself this question. Can you legally and lawfully give something away you don't own? Now that question is very simple, and the answer is even more simple. The answer to that is no. So on the same note, if you can't give something away legally and lawfully that you do not own, you do not possess, you don't have clean, clear, and free title to, okay, you didn't create it, whatever the case may be, it doesn't belong to you, you can't give it away, that would be theft, right? Now, on that same notion, if you can't give away legally and lawfully something you don't own, let me ask you this question. Can you pledge as collateral something you don't own? What's your answer? You got brains. I love it. The answer to that is, of course, no. You cannot pledge something you don't own. I can't pledge your car to get a loan from my buddy down the block because I don't own it. It's not my collateral. I can't rightfully pledge it, just like I can't rightfully give it away. Now, here's the kick in the nuts right here. How did you collateralize your real estate and property under a UCC1 financing statement and a contract, if you will, if you didn't fucking own it? Uh-oh. Ding, ding, winner, winner, fucking chicken dinner, right? Are you listening? Are you hearing the fucking words I'm telling you? This is very important. How the fuck did you collateralize real estate and property on a UCC1 financing statement and turn it over to the bank if you didn't already own the motherfucker? Are you listening? You can't. It's an impossibility, okay? See, the truth is, you already paid for it with a promissory note. They already monetized that damn note. It's been paid for in full, okay? Whether they took it to the Treasury to redeem that promissory note, or they converted that note into an order to pay to the Federal Reserve, who extended their credit. They extended their credit on your blank banker's endorsement, your private pledge to the bank. So did the bank ever lend you a dime? Did the bank ever lend anything of theirs to you? And the answer to that is no. So when they come into foreclosure, welcome that fucking foreclosure. Smile from ear to ear because you got them by the balls. By them bringing forward a foreclosure, they admit that they received something of value from you. Okay? But one thing they can't prove, and one thing they'll never be able to prove, is that they gave you something of value in return, because they didn't. That's where the Money Net Daily Log Transaction Report 120 comes in handy, because those funds, those credits on account, didn't come from Bank of America. They didn't come from Bank of America NA. They came from the Federal Reserve extending the credit based upon your blank banker's endorsement as a pledge, ladies and gentlemen. So if anybody really had the grounds and the right to sue or foreclose, it'd be the Federal Reserve. But guess what? They're never going to sue you because they're never going to let that fucking cat out of the bag that they bought your fucking note, that they extended their credit for your blank banker endorsement pledge. Okay? They're never going to tell you that the original bank, who's your securities intermediary trustee, converted that note from a promissory note, which destroys the note, by the way. And destroy doesn't mean that it was set on fire or that it was shredded. It destroys the note from its original intent and purpose, which is what you gave it when you first signed it. You signed it as a promissory note to pay it back. Pay it back. But the problem is they never gave you anything in return, so you don't rightfully owe them anything back. Why would you make a repayment, another payment, a repayment, when you've already paid once? What's the point? Well, they snare you in by pledging your real estate and property as collateral, unbeknownst to you, undisclosed to you, and now they've hoodwinked you into a contract, and you're bound by it, all right? Now, the good Lord tells us that there's only one way out of a contract. There's actually two. He tells us there's two. He says, honor your agreement, pay your debts, take care of your contractual agreements, right? And on the other hand, he says there's only one way out of that contract is if it's unconscionable. Is it unconscionable what they did? Did they use false and misleading deceptive trade practices to trick you into being a surety for a loan, a mortgage that never occurred? And secondly, when the note is separated from the mortgage and not sealed in the trust on closing, the trust collapses. Okay? The note and the mortgage must always be together. They are never kept together, ladies and gentlemen. Ever. 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 That's why I'm so confident I can tell you that 98% of fucking mortgages are absolute bullshit. Bullshit. So, for those of you that have actually paid off the alleged mortgage, know this, that you're the undisclosed third-party beneficiary that is owing like an 8% or 18% return on your investment, plus all the payments that you made, and your original fucking note back. And when they can't give you your original note back, because they won't be able to give you your original note back, because they turned around and sold that motherfucker to the Federal Reserve for the Federal Reserve to extend its credit so they could do what is called fractional reserve lending, because after all, that's what creates new currency, not new money, new currency into the economy, ladies and gentlemen. That's how that fucker works, all right? So you're rightfully due an owing with, maybe take them into the court, or let them drag you into the court. Fuck it, let them drag you on in. You want a full forensic audit, a full comprehensive financial forensic audit. You want the MoneyNet Daily Log Transaction Report 120. You want to know who the note was transferred to, whether or not the note was converted from from a promissory note to an order to pay. You want all that information, ladies and gentlemen. Now, they may give you a little riffraff and say, oh, we're going to object. He's on a fishing expedition. He's just dreaming up shit. Your Honor, this is just what we do. This is how the banking system works. It's customary. Now, I want you to understand something. I've been in a banking quibble with a number of banks, and one of the guys that we were working with, he just didn't quite understand it, and he got smoked in the court. Both James Bethel and I jumped up in the court. We were chomping at the bit. They were actually dumb enough to put the fucking head banker on the stand, and we were salivating at the mouth to drill this guy. I mean, it was absolutely unbelievable that they would put him on the stand. And the gentleman just didn't quite understand how important the questions that I was writing down and handing him across the bar were. And he just kept getting distracted. And at one point, the banker said, Your Honor, this is just how we do business. This is custom. And the judge turned around and looked at the defendant, the alleged defendant, and said, Are you okay with that? Do you understand what he's saying? And he leans back in his chair and he goes, Yeah, I guess. Never, ever, ever agree to that bullshit. Because what he just did was enter into a contract. He agreed that their customs are law, and he's going to abide by their customs. Customs are not law, ladies and gentlemen. It may be the way they do business, but by no means does it mean that it's lawful or that it's legal. All right? So you really got to pay attention to what's being said, how it's being articulated. And if you're ever put in a situation where you really don't know how to answer, I'm going to take it under advisement, speak to my counsel in private, and I'll get back to that. Let's save this question for another day. Note that I hold an objection to any ruling being made on this specific topic until I've had ample, adequate time to speak with my counsel, reflect upon it, and I'll respond to you guys in writing. I'll also give you a written objection as to why I'm objecting at this point, because I need adequate time to speak with my counsel. And because you won't allow my counsel in the room because he's not a licensed bar attorney, which is a fucking joke. There is no license to practice law, okay? You unfortunately are causing denial of due process of law, so you can at least extend the courtesy of either setting a recess, giving me a half hour to an hour to go consult with my counsel outside, or we can do a continuance and talk about this another day, and we can leave this subject matter on the table, okay? Anyway, I kind of got off track because some of the stuff I was hearing today was just, it blew my mind. All right, back to this citizenship thing, all right? He has a constitutional he was a constitutional alien and a statutory national at the same time. He was alien to the state of the Union, okay, the Union of States, when all the 13 states got together and decided to become the Union of States, and then other states were adopted, and naturally the same principles of the Republican form of government guaranteed to those 13 states must also equally be granted to every other state. I don't give a shit if they were part of the Louisiana Purchase, they were Spanish territories, they were conquests that were taken over. Don't give a shit. Each state has a constitution. Each state has to be afforded the same amount of value as the 13 original colonies who entered into a Union of States agreement, who ratified this constitution being a trust document, the indenture being the preamble to the trust document, conclusively proving that it is a trust, having multiple signatures, multiple witnesses, all conclusive and indicative of a trust being manifested. Not to mention the Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Papers that so many people seem to forget about. I don't hardly ever hear anybody talking about the Federalist Papers. They're very important as well. And this is all culminating to make and manufacture a constructive trust. Okay. It's a trust. And who are the beneficiaries? We, the people, are the beneficiaries of this trust. Now, people would argue, Derrick, you're not a signer to that Constitution. That Constitution doesn't apply to you. You're right. The Constitution in itself doesn't actually apply to me. Who it applies to is government. It limits their ability to reach out and touch me where I don't like to be touched, all right? Which would be the pocketbook or the old butthole, right? Nobody likes to be poked in the butthole. So, and this is most often what that invisible Uncle Sam bastard likes to do, is reach out and tickle you where it smells funny, and none of us fucking appreciate it. So what do we do to prevent that? We got to become learned. We got to be able to stand upon our unalienable rights and let them know how the law works, all right? In your legal society, I know you little crack-sniffing fuckers aren't going to be doing that shit to me, because I'll take my belt off and whoop your ass with it, all right? With my intellectual superior knowledge to the facts, the truth, the light, and the way, correct? That's just what it is. You show me the injured party, I'm an honorable man, I'll provide remedy. You can't do that, then you brought defamation of character upon me. Your slanderous ways have caused me an injury. In fact, I've been caused harm, damage, and loss. You have violated my unalienable rights to live peacefully, sensibly, and in the pursuit of my happiness, right? Very simplistic. You don't have to be all lawyer-esque to prove your point, okay? The naturalization they are talking about above in the Lee Shu versus Atkinson 110 F Supra 50 ND Cal 1953 in the context of the territories and possessions is statutory naturalization rather than constitutional naturalization when it is done to people in a territory or possession that remains a territory or possession and not a constitutional state, a union of state or the state of the unions, right? The union state members. These same territorial statutory citizens, remember there's a difference between a statutory citizen and a constitutional citizen, okay, must again be collectively naturalized, but this time it is a constitutional naturalization rather than a statutory naturalization. When states join the Union under the Constitution, they convert from territories to constitutional states, and the people in them are constitutionally naturalized by acts of Congress. Now, Congress has a duality. Not too long ago, I had some Yale graduate lawyer call me up and say, you just don't understand the duality of sovereignty, Derrick. And I'm like, okay, dude, you're off your fucking crack pipe. You're way out there. I don't know what they're teaching you in law school, but I'm starting to kind of see what he's talking about, because Congress operates on the commercial side in the public venue. As I said earlier, there are 3 definitions for the United States according to the Supreme Court. Okay, so Congress operates on the commercial side in some aspects and some of their acts, Congress. And then on the other side, they also operate on the de jure Republican side of the government. Now, it's a matter of being able to read between the lines and see what is written and how it was constructed and whether or not it applies to you or it applies to the corporation. Now, if it applies to the corporation, what they're saying and what they're implying and what they're inferring and what they're able to do through the manipulation of due process of law is they're presuming and assuming that you're an officer of that corporation. Okay? Now, if you're an officer of that corporation, shouldn't you be getting paid? I mean, if I'm a driver, I'm being prosecuted for driving, yet I wasn't gainfully employed by anybody that I'm aware of at the time. Who could I have possibly been employed by? Was it the state of Nebraska? Was I hauling goods and passengers and services for money or currency? And if so, who owes me for that? Well, if I don't have an employer that I can think of, which I haven't for many, many of years, then who is gainfully employing me? Because in order to constitute being a driver, I must be hauling services or goods or passengers or freight for a fee, right? Engaged in commerce. And if I'm not doing that, then who's gainfully employing me? Must be the state of Nebraska, or must be the state of confusion, whatever state you're living in, right? So maybe it might be a good idea to go ahead and submit them a bill from the time you was 15 years old with a learner's permit to the age you are now for all the services you've rendered to them by them using your private intellectual property while you were providing services for them, right? Just a thought. Naturalization rather than a statutory naturalization. When states join the Union under the Constitution, they convert from territories to constitutional states, and the people in them are constitutionally naturalized by acts of Congress. And that naturalization is the equivalent of that found in Title 8, USC, subsection 1421. Here's the proof from the Boyd case, footnoted from in Lee Shu above. It is too late at this day to question the plenary power of Congress over the territories as observed by Mr. Justice Matthews, delivering the opinion of the court in Murphy versus Ramsey, 114 U.S. 1544. It rests with Congress to say whether, in a given case, any of the people residents in the territory shall participate in the elections of its officers, or the making of its laws, and it may, therefore, take from them any right of suffrage it may previously have conferred, or at any time modified or abridged it as it may deem expedient. Here's the important part. The right of local self-government, as known to our system as a constitutional franchise. Remember how I tell you guys, the Constitution it's a charter, okay? And there's multiple constitutions. You have their corporate charter under Title 28, 3002, 15A, the Reorganization Act of 1871 done by Abraham Lincoln. Okay, that's the commercial side of it. And then you have the constitutional franchise charter that was created by the founding fathers. Belongs under the Constitution to the states and to the people thereof, by whom that Constitution was ordained, and to whom, by its terms, all power not conferred by it upon the government of the United States was expressly reserved. Do you understand what that means? Let me break it down for you. If you proclaim to be a United States citizen, you're part of the federal zone, part of a federal territory, and you have volunteered for that position for benefits, and if you receive the benefits, then you also receive the disadvantages of those benefits, okay, of whatever may come. But if you are a state citizen, a state national, owing an allegiance to the state, which the state has its own constitution, two separate entities. You've got the federal government and the state government. The state government clearly says in Articles 9 and Articles 10, right? In Article 9, I believe it says, what isn't rightfully granted to the government by the people resides in the people, period. So you get to consent to your form of government so long as you're not out there injuring, causing harm, damage, injury, loss, maiming people, scheming people, being a lying, looting, pandering, sniveling piece of shit. So long as you're not doing any of that, you are free to do whatever you so choose. So long as it doesn't encroach upon the rights of your fellow brothers and sisters, your fellow man within your community and within the country, right? So it's expressly reserved. The personal and civil rights of the inhabitants of the territories are secured to them as to other citizens by the principles of constitutional liberty, which restrain all the agencies of government, state, and national. Their political rights are franchises which they hold as privileges in the legislative discretion of the Congress of the United States. If we concede that this discretion in Congress is limited by the obvious purpose for which it was conferred, and that those purposes are satisfied by measures which prepare the people of the territories to become states in the Union, still the conclusion cannot be avoided that the act of Congress herein question is clearly within that justification. Congress having the power to deal with the people of the territories in view of the future states to be formed from them, there can be no doubt that in the admission of a state, a collective naturalization may be effected in accordance with the intention of Congress and the people applying for admission. Admission on an equal footing with the original states in all respects whatever involves equality of constitutional right and power, which cannot thereafterwards be controlled by statutes of Congress. Okay? Statutes and acts of Congress don't affect you, ladies and gentlemen. All right? It affects the territories. Remember, real judges, don't make their opinions based upon statutory law. It just doesn't happen. Only ministerial administrators administrate using statutory law. Period. Cut and dry. That's just how it works. That's the commercial side of it. The private ad hoc, private corporations identified as courts within the territories of the United States are nothing more than private ad hoc for-profit businesses operating under the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code, dealing in securities, okay? That's what they're doing. It's business, baby. Securities, bonds, excise taxes, okay, and insurance. That's what they deal with. Let's move forward. Admission on an equal footing with the original states in all respects whatever involves equality of constitutional right and power, which cannot thereafterwards be controlled by statutes of Congress. And it also involves the adoption as citizens of the United States of those whom Congress makes members of the political community, and who are recognized as such in the formation of the new state with the consent of Congress. Boyd versus Nebraska, 143 U.S. 135. This case happened to happen in 1892. Let me wet my whistle. They don't say this either, but if a constitutional state leaves the Union, as they did in the Civil War, its citizens become foreign nationals. If that state is then recaptured through armed forces as it was in the Civil War, the state becomes a territory and the citizens revert back to being privileged territorial citizens. Now, unalienable rights. That's something that none of us granted or bestowed upon each other. It's something that comes from a higher power, whether you believe in God or you don't, or Yahweh, Yahshua, whatever the case may be. Let's talk about privileges. Privileges are something man gives to another man when he's lording over him. For example, if you work for me, I'm going to give you the privilege of taking a 15-minute break at some point in the morning. It might not always be at 10 o'clock. It might not always be at 9 o'clock. Maybe it'll be an extended lunch where I say, hey, I didn't give you 15 minutes in the morning. I'm going to extend that privilege that I didn't give to you earlier. I took it away because it was a privilege to have a coffee break at 10:30. But you guys pissed me off by dicking off. So now you get your 15 minutes extended to your lunch, and you're going to keep slaving away until noon. That's just how it works. That's a privilege, ladies and gentlemen. A privilege is something that one man can give to another and has the ability and the power to take it away, which means one man is a superior, the other being an inferior. One man has the power to create that privilege, and the other man is bound to obey it. That's privileges, ladies and gentlemen. Now just think about this. The most corrupt, senile motherfuckers in the world, near as I can tell, next to bumbling Joe Biden, that fucking idiot, okay, is somehow in control of being able to manipulate the situation and take away your privileges, while his crack-smoking, dope-smoking whore of a son is out there molesting children? Are those the type of people that you want privileges from? I sure the fuck don't need a privilege from people like that, and you don't either. So it's time to grow a set of balls, start to become educated, and stand up and give them the old fuck you, because they're criminals. That's what they are. There's no bullshit about it. They don't even fucking hide it anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, they should all be in jail. Most of them should be swinging from fucking trees at this point. The problem is, the American people have lost their heart. They don't understand that freedom isn't free, and they're in this slumber. What do we do? I'm only one man. I don't know what I could do. I mean, I'm just one guy. I'm just one fucking guy too. But I give it my all every fucking day to expose these sons of bitches. And if you do the same, eventually there'll be enough people in a community that say, you know what? We're just not doing business with you guys anymore. Our county board is shut down. If you guys act aggressively towards the people, the free inhabitants in this community who wish to travel freely, unmolested, and enjoy their rights to freedom and liberty, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We'll liquidate your damn bonds, and we'll liquidate any assets that you think you have or any insurance policies that you think you have, and we will single-handedly remove you from our community. That's how it's going to work. You either work for us or Selah fucking V will get rid of you. And that includes your judges, your sheriffs, because your sheriffs aren't your sheriffs anymore, ladies and gentlemen. They have entered into contract for federal funding, and that's why the entire police force and your sheriff's departments are being militarized. Okay? Federalized, incentivized, block grants and grant payments go to the sheriff and the police department for every ticket they issue. Okay, it might not be for every ticket. Maybe they generalize it and put it in if you do 30 tickets per month, we're going to issue this amount of block grants, okay? It's a fucking fancy way of saying a bribe, okay? That's what it is. They say, oh, it's not a bribe, it's a grant, Derrick. You got to know the difference. My great-grandmother once told me the thing that'll destroy this nation above all other things is political correctness, okay? And so when we allow them to identify things in certain ways, like, for example, the FBI has deemed themselves with the authority and the power to identify domestic terrorists as sovereign citizens. Nowhere has Congress made a law about sovereign citizens, nor have they defined what a sovereign citizen is. Nowhere in the legislative body has it been defined that sovereign and citizen together makes a domestic terrorist. You want to know who made that up? Who came up with that bullshit? That would be the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the bulwark of undermining the very system put in place to keep the checks and balances and the separation of powers in place. And here we have these knuckleheads creating shit out of thin fucking air that somehow the gun-toting morons have all agreed to. Oh, yeah. Sounds legitimate. The FBI said it. If the FBI said it, you know. Why is the FBI training the Federal Bureau of Investigations, which is really supposed to be the federal bank investigators? They're supposed to be investigating the courts and the judges and making sure they're not violating your fucking rights. That's what the FBI is really supposed to be doing. Why are they out here dictating terms that are now being utilized against you in a public setting? Where did they get the authority? Where did they get the power to make definitions that bind you? Okay, just food for thought. Think about it. Let's get back to this. If that state is then recaptured through armed forces as it was in the Civil War, which there's nothing civil about war, that's an oxymoron. There's nothing civil about war. What it was a war of northern aggression. If you really delve into the history, get away from the high school fucking college books that teach you about the Civil War and all this bullshit and bullocks that they put in there and really read about what the Civil fucking War was about, it was the War of Northern Aggression, okay? The state becomes a territory and the citizens revert back to being privileged territorial citizens until the state votes to rejoin the Union. The following aspects of the above case was later overruled in Downs versus Bidwell, where they concluded that the Constitution does not, by default, apply in federal territory. Okay, again, the Constitution doesn't apply in a federal territory. How many of you have been to a court and the judge says, you bring up the Constitution again, I'm going to put you in jail for contempt of court? You know why he's saying that? He's telling you the jurisdiction that he's operating in, which is clearly a federal fucking territory, all right? Which means the Constitution don't fucking apply. He's in a commercial zone, the federal zone. He's under Title 28, 3002, 15A, working for the state of, not just the state, if you will. All right, the state of Indiana, state of Colorado, state of Nebraska, those are all subsidiary corporations of Washington, D.C. They belong directly to Washington, D.C. And the state of Nebraska, Colorado, all those states, their seal for their flag, for their great seal and embosser is registered in Canada. It's registered in Canada, ladies and gentlemen, which means they're fucking foreign. They're operating under a foreign seal and sigil, executing legal processes in commercial legal land. They are fucking foreign to the Republic. All right? That's what this document is about, and I'm hoping I'm doing a good job of conveying it to you. Where they conclude that the Constitution does not, by default, apply in a federal territory and only applies in constitutional states, states of the Union, okay? So let me give you a definition of a state. Let me give you a description of the state of the Union. Nebraska is a state of the Union. State of Nebraska is part of a fucking federal territory, okay? That's the difference. It's that fucking simple. There's Colorado, and then there's the state of Colorado. Two separate and very distinct entities, okay, with very different rules and regulations. One is lawful and follows a Republican form of government, and one is legal and is a corporate construct. And you either volunteer into that and you're an officer of that construct, therefore you're bound by the statutory rules, regulations, and provisions, which aren't fucking laws. They're bylaws of that corporation, but they're not bound to you unless you agree to them. All right? I'm really hoping this is sinking in. And that Congress must expressly extend its application to a specific territory in order for it to apply. The personal and civil rights of the inhabitants of the territories are secured to them, as to other citizens, by the principles of constitutional liberty, which restrain all the agencies of government, states, and nationals. To summarize what we have learned in this section from examining the relationship between territories and states of the Union, possessions and territories are listed in Title 48 of the United States Code. Title 48 of the United States Code explains to you the possessions and territories. Federal territories are statutory states. State of Nebraska, state of Colorado, state of Texas. Okay, that's a statutory state. All right? Under Title 4 USC subsection 110D, under most acts of Congress. Number 3, there are no territories left. Puerto Rico used to be a territory, but subsequently became a possession, constitutional state of the Union, are foreign and alien in relation to statutory states. Okay? So that's number 4. Constitutional states of the Union are foreign and alien in relation to statutory states. So, for example, Nebraska is the constitutional state. The state of Nebraska is a statutory state, okay? So if you're a citizen of the state of Nebraska, then you also are a United States citizen proclaiming to be a citizen of the state of Nebraska, you also inadvertently, unbeknownst to you, by your lack of reading, have then and there pledged yourself to be a United States citizen. Guaranteed every fucking day of the week. Okay? I hope this is helping. Number 5, constitutional citizens or nationals are aliens in relation to federal territories and possession. Let me say it again. Number 5, constitutional citizens or nationals are aliens in relation to federal territories and possessions, which is the area that the income tax is limited to. Are you hearing me? If you're a United States fucking citizen, I just want to thank you very much for paying your motherfucking taxes. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Keep doing what you're doing because, again, I held no ill will or animosity to a U.S. citizen. You want to be a U.S. citizen? You go out there and be a U.S. citizen all fucking day long. Suit yourself, all right? You want to be a slave, subject yourself to a bunch of bullshit and bureaucratic, lying, looting, pandering pieces of fucking shit that don't follow their own fucking rules? I salute you, all right? Now, number 6. A statutory non-citizen national of the United States under Title 8 U.S.C. subsection 1408 from a possession in an alien within a constitutional state and can be deported if he commits a crime, but only if an act of Congress expressly identifies them as an alien. Otherwise, they are presumed to not be aliens regardless of whether they are also statutory nationals or not. That's Rabang versus Boyd, 353 U.S. 427, 1957. An example of such a possession is American Samoa or Swains Island. The Philippines also used to be a possession, but was later emancipated. Number 7. And again, we'll get into the 3 definitions of the United States, and hopefully this literature will make more sense to you when we break that down. Statutory national status is a revocable privilege. What did I tell you guys about privileges? If man giveth, man can certainly taketh away. If God giveth, God be the only one that can taketh away. Remember that, all right? If God giveth, there ain't a man on this fucking God-given earth that can take anything that God has given you from you, period. Doesn't happen. He give you that right, that ability. He give you that breath of life. He's the keeper of that breath. He's the keeper of that life, and he can take it any damn time he pleases, okay? Man doesn't have a right to take what God has bestowed upon you, okay? But man can most certainly take the privileges that have been granted to you, and thus by you accepting those privileges, you also bear the burdens of those privileges as well, the disadvantages. So pay attention. Let's be cognizant about this. Statutory national status is a competent of being either a statutory citizen or a statutory non-citizen national of the United States under Title 8 U.S.C. subsection 1408. When a possession is granted independence, its inhabitants convert from non-citizen nationals of the United States to both statutory aliens and constitutional aliens in relation to the national government. Number 10, statutory nationals and citizens of the United States at birth under Title 8 U.S.C. subsection 1401 are much more complicated than all the others. 10.1, an example of such party is someone born in Puerto Rico. 10.2, Title 26 U.S.C. subsection 2209 identifies Puerto Ricans as non-resident, not a citizen of the United States as follows. Title 26 U.S. Code subsection 2209. Certain residents of possessions considered non-residents, not citizens of the United States. A decedent who was a citizen of the United States and a resident of a possession thereof at the time of his death shall, for the purposes of the tax imposed by this chapter, be considered a non-resident, not a citizen of the United States, within the meaning of that term, wherever used in this title, but only if such person acquired his United States citizenship solely by reasons of 1, his being a citizen of such possession of the United States, or 2, his birth or residence within such possession of the United States. We can see based on the above that United States within the Internal Revenue Code definitely does not include federal territory or possession and is not within the geographical definition found at Title 26 USC subsection 7701 A9 and A10. That is why we conclude that United States means the government or the corporate United States as a legal person rather than a specific geography for the purpose of income from source within the United States. 10.3. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Gonzalez versus Williams, 192 U.S. 1, 1904, that such parties are not constitutional aliens, but did so not by looking at whether they were constitutional nationals, but whether Congress made them constitutional aliens or not. Therefore, constitutional nationals and statutory nationals are not synonymous, and their relationship is defined by statute and not organic law. By default, at least we can say that they are foreign and alien in relation to each other, but Congress can alter that by statute. When we come back, we'll get into the Counsel for the Government contends on the aliens and what Congress is able to do through statute and how it applies and who it applies to. We'll get back with you later on this evening.